right, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to The Unspoken Truth. I'm your host, Rob Russ, and I'm joined by my fantastic co-host, Edward Anderson, over there in Minnesota. How you doing, Ed?
Sweating like a pig. How about you? How you doing there, buddy?
Oh, well, it's dark o'clock outside at 5:30 in the morning here in Sydney. In the future, it's actually Saturday here, so the future is looking bright, just so you know, because I know you're a bit behind there in the United States, but I'm excited to round out the week with another show here with you, Ed, today. We've got some really big news. We've got a little bit of fun we're going to have here on the show as well. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is your first time here, welcome. It's great to have you here. Thank you so much for your support. If you're joining us live, make sure you drop a comment in the comment section there on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or wherever you're joining us live from, and we'll see that and reply to that. We love a bit of interaction here on the show. We'll be going for the next hour or so. Also want to remind everybody that we're available as a podcast. You can find us over on Spotify, also on Apple Podcasts as well. And we'd love for you to come on over and to join us on Twitter and on Telegram as well. And all of the links are already in the description below. So if you just scroll down, you'll be able to see those links right there. All right, I want to get right into it today, Ed, without further ado, because we've got a lot to cover. You've got a great report here for us today about failing upwards and how that is the new norm. I have to say, as I scroll through my Twitter feed, first thing in the morning, trying to catch up with what's been going on overnight and seeing what's happening in the world, I have to say that is actually the case. Most media conferences I see with politicians or public bureaucrats are people that you just got to wonder, you question their decisions, man, and how are they not ever held to account with those things as well. It's pretty crazy. So I'm looking forward to hearing that little report from you. I've also got a report coming out of the US just in the last couple of hours where the United States has passed rules and legislations to say that if nuclear weapons are used in Ukraine, that will be considered an attack on NATO. So here we go with the escalation, folks. We were talking just yesterday about Sergei Shoigu saying that if long-range missiles from the West were used against Crimea, that would be considered a direct involvement from the UK and the US. We now know that Storm Shadow was the missile that took out that bridge. There was some evidence of that. There was like bits and pieces of it, and you can see it says MDMA France on it, and it's got the number on it. So the missile comes from that company, and it's a French missile. So we know that it was a Storm Shadow missile that hit the bridge. You can see the debris on the bridge as well. But they've also countered that pretty much straight away. So it begs the question, are we now at war with Russia? Is Russia now going to declare war on the United States and the UK? Are they going to make good on their threats once and for all? We're going to have a little discussion about that, folks, and tell you why that actually matters to you as well. Ed, what's happening for the weekend, mate? We're approaching the 4th of July weekend. Does that like drag out for 2 weeks before, or is that something that just happens only on the weekend?
Wow, and also, so you know about the 4th of July, huh?
Yeah, of course we do.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of like our Australia Day. We have an Australia Day version of that, but Australia Day for us is on the 26th of January. So that date is at the end of the summer holidays for most people, and it kind of is the demarcation point where everybody goes back to work in summertime. So you guys have it in the guts of the year, like June, July, like now. Yeah. We have it towards the end. Is that the end or the beginning of your holidays?
Of what, July 4th?
The 4th, yeah.
Well, usually it's a 3-day weekend, right? Nah. So officially it's usually the Monday after. If it doesn't fall on a Monday, it's the Monday afterward. But most people, what they do is they'll take Friday off of work as well. So for most people, it's a 4-day weekend.
So do you have like a permanent weekend there where you live in Minnesota?
A permanent weekend. What do you, yeah.
I say happy Friday, and Ed looks at me like, is it Friday?
Yeah, that's right. The only way I know the day of the week is these shows, because Rob always reminds me what day of the week it is. Yeah.
Well, that's a good thing. That means you're not in the rat race, man.
That's right. Well, the same thing with my birthday. I until somebody says happy birthday, I don't know it's my birthday every year. So,
well, you've had so many of them now, haven't you?
Oh, ouch. But I don't celebrate I haven't celebrated my birthday in a long time.
We should fix that, mate. It's an important day.
Why?
Oh, come on.
It's just another day.
Wait, it's your day, man. We got to buy beers. We got to go on the market and have some fun. Come on.
Yeah, it's a celebration. Created by the greeting card companies. That's.
All right, Mr. Cynic, why don't we kick off today's report? What have you got for us? Failing upwards. This is something that we always facetiously talk about, and it's a very tongue-in-cheek topic for you and I, but it is a real thing, that's for sure.
Sure. And okay, so this is about 45 minutes long. So just settle. No, just kidding. It's about a 4-minute presentation, and then we'll talk about it afterward. Right. Have a job where not only are you not punished. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to have a job where not only are you not punished for your failures, but you're actually rewarded for them? So this is an instructional video about how you too can have a job where you are rewarded for your failures. Okay, so the daydream of having a job where you would actually get promoted the more you failed wouldn't occur to the average person. I mean, you would think, well, what do you mean I'm going to be rewarded for my failures? If I do a bad job, I'm going to be demoted. I'm going to be punished. Well, that is because you are normal. You actually have a sense of integrity and a sense of doing a good job in order to get promoted. Well, there is a class of people out there who are rewarded for their failures. Let's take a look at one stark example that just came out today. So, out of Zero Hedge, Biden administration rewards school lockdown champion with Homeland Security role. The Biden administration has appointed the person who pushed hardest for schools to remain closed during the worldwide flu to a new position within the Department of Homeland Security. Randy Weingarten, the controversial head of American Federation of Teachers Union, will be one of the new members of a Homeland Security Academic Partnership Council. The newly formed council will provide strategic and actionable recommendations to the security on campus safety and security, improved coordination, research priorities, hiring, and more. Weingarten recently attempted to rewrite history, claiming she spent every waking day during the worldwide flu trying to open schools, despite the fact that her union aggressively pushed for lockdowns at the local level and lobbied to keep them in place. Here's a tweet by Nikki Nelly. Randy Weingarten has gone from dictating the CDC's school reopening guidance to now advising the Department of Homeland Security on how to keep students safe. Randy should have no role in government. The Biden administration puts teachers' unions over parents every single time. Okay, so I know that none of you are surprised at this, okay? If you belong to the club, you are a protected class. It is just a well-known fact that 95% of government employees are liberals. And you can tell that by the size of their donations to the Democratic Party. Yes, about 95% of government contributions to election campaigns go to Democrats. It doesn't matter what your qualifications are for a job in government. What matters is, do you toe the line? The Department of Education is a classic example, right? The Department of Education sounds nice, right? Hey, they're going to look out for the kids. They don't look out for the kids at all. This is a lobbying group, a government-backed lobbying group for the teachers union. It's all about the teachers. I mean, another good example is Pete Buttigieg. What? He's the transportation secretary? So again, in government, once you get to a certain executive level, you're solid. It doesn't matter how bad you are at your job. You will get promoted. You just have to go to the right cocktail parties. You have to know the right people. And whenever anybody tries to call you on your failures, you can just deny it. Even though we have you on tape, in congressional testimony saying things, you can still just deny it and get away with it. Mostly because the media is in on it as well. So if you want a job where you are secure, where it doesn't matter how much you screw up, you're still going to get promoted, go to work for the government. Now, I know that a lot of people who work for the government, especially at local levels, these are people who actually are public servants and they're trying to do their job every day. But as soon as you get into the management class and higher, you're in. Okay, you're golden. It doesn't matter how much you screw up. There is no accountability in government because they're all in on it. Okay, and that's my observation for the day.
All right. Once again, failing upwards. I bet you didn't have to go very far to find some screenshots of those people.
No. They're all over the page, these examples. And I could have gone for an hour showing you examples, but everyone knows. I'm not telling people anything new, anything they don't already know. This is more of a talking point.
So something new happened here in Australia that you might not have seen through the week. I don't know if you saw the shorts videos, because I put out a lot of videos, and I'm not sure if you saw it. There was one from Senator Jackie Lambie. So Jackie Lambie represents, she's an independent down in Tasmania. So she doesn't have a huge constituency, but she's a pretty loud voice in Parliament. And because she sits as an independent, she wields quite a bit of power and negotiating power, which is a really good thing. That's the way government is supposed to work. But Jackie is she was in the army, she's ex-army. And in the last couple of years, the Australian Special Forces have been dragged across the coals and, dragged through the ringer about war crimes allegations. And the leadership of the Australian Defence Force were never held to the same standard of accountability. And through the Ben Roberts-Smith public hearings, it had come out that a bunch of war crimes were being committed, and people were doing the wrong thing. And it went all the way up the chain of command in Special Forces, and they came back and said, look, the integrity of the regiment is what matters. What we're going to do is handle this internally, so we're going to leave it as it is. And the boss, the chief of the Australian Defence Force, was in charge of special operations during this time period. And he's been asked several times in public hearings, are you going to hand back your Distinguished Service Cross? Are you going to hand back these medals? Are you going to do that? And he just keeps saying, well, that's not for me to say. But eventually he's done the right thing and handed it back. So that's a good thing. But Jackie Lambie has been so upset about all of this, and she calls it a giant boys' club. And to your point about failing upwards, the military leadership in Australia didn't fail upwards so much, but what they did is they just let the people down at the sharp end of the spear, the lower end of the echelon, take all the blame for everything. So she referred these people to the International Criminal Court. And she's like, I've been trying to get a meeting with the boss of the Defence Force for months and months. Nobody's listening. What am I going to do? And I'm telling you for the last time, here's the opportunity for you to come clean on it and do something about it. I've referred you to the International Criminal Court. And so the threshold for that, so just think of this, man. America is not even part of the ICC. So, and there's a very defined reason for that. I think there's only America and 2 other countries that are not part of it. And the reason for that is you can only be reported there and get them to take action if the country that is reporting you has done nothing about it. So that's her threshold for these people in leadership failing upwards. And we've seen this time and time again in the Australian government. We did a couple of videos about this recently where there was some Senate estimates hearings, and these people were, pretty much destroying the country as a result of their policies throughout COVID. And then they were promoted and then they were given better jobs. There was a case of the person who was responsible for human resources for the Australian Defence Force, who started the job 6 or 7 years ago, and 6 or 7 years later today, there's only 100 people more in the Australian Defence Force, even though their remit is to get more and more people to actually join. And they're just unable to do it. They're unable to get cut through with their message. They don't know what they're doing, and they're just absolutely hopeless, but there's no accountability. And that's the thing I think that grinds most people's gears, is that there's no accountability. And we've seen this week Jackie Lambie come out and hold the government to account and hold the military leadership to account by referring them to a third party. And I thought to myself, man, there's something really going wrong there. There is a real breakdown of communication. If the Australian Defence Force cannot give a senator 1 hour of her time or 1 hour of their time, say, what's the matter? What's wrong? Why are you jumping up and down and squawking so badly? What's the matter? Come and show us. And then she goes there and does that, and then they're like, they don't do anything about it. So she couldn't even get the meeting to tell them what was wrong. And she was urging people in Parliament, in the Senate, to actually allow her to table the documents to show people what had actually happened. And the leadership knew about it. So it seems like there is some accountability, but I doubt that anyone will have to do anything other than say sorry. It's like...
Well, again, once you get to a certain level, once you get to that executive level, you don't feel the need to have to justify yourself. There's, the arrogance when you get to that level. I'll just ignore, and eventually she'll go away. I'll just ignore, I won't show up, and eventually she'll get tired of asking. That's what they think. So Not that old saying, right? It's not what you know these days. It's who you know, right? As far as getting the job that you want, you know, government is corrupt, and it's a big boys club. Exactly, it's one big boys club, and
Well, we've seen that here in the Australian Defence Force as well, and that was brought to light again with the AUKUS deal, with the submarine deal that we did. Sorry to keep talking about the military, but the things that kind of stand out the most, first of all, because they're such big projects, right? They're massive projects. So we had the contract go out. What submarines are we going to buy? The Collins-class submarines need to go away. They're going to become obsolete soon. So So we looked at the Japanese ones, the French ones, some German ones, some American stuff as well. And eventually ScoMo killed all of the deals and said, do this AUKUS thing. So we're getting Virginia-class submarine. That ticks the right box, right? It's the right tool for the right job, etc. Well, you could argue otherwise, but let's assume that it is the right tool for the right job. One of the things that came out amongst all of that was the app. So one of the reporters said, why has it taken so long to get to this point? And someone described it really well. So the people that end up in senior leadership positions in the Australian Defence Force are the ones responsible for these projects. So, you know, you get promoted to be a captain or a commodore or an admiral in the Navy, and they get handed this thing, and now you're responsible for gazillions of dollars of Australian money, and you've got to figure out the best way to spend it. And if you end up in a project where, okay, you're going to be part of the acquisition team to get these new submarines, it'll get done. So surprisingly, the person who was responsible for the AUKUS deal and rolling out nuclear submarines for Australia, his name is Rear Admiral Jonathan Meade. And I served with Johnny Meade. I know him, and I used to sit across from him, and he was the principal warfare officer, and I was the track supervisor, and him and I used to play anti-submarine warfare continuously. And his background is as a clearance diver, so it's an Aussie version of a SEAL, and he was part of the dive team. I used to dive with him all the time, and we were kind of close work colleagues because we're in the same watch and we're doing the same stuff all the time together, and particularly the ASW stuff, because he was a torpedo and anti-submarine warfare officer. He was a TASO. And so he's the person responsible for rolling this out. And I thought to myself, man, I was in the Navy in 1994 and he's still in the Navy. No wonder he's an admiral. You know, he's been in there a very long time, his entire career. And he seemed like an old guy when I got there. Like he'd been in the clearance diving teams for a couple of years. He'd gone and changed over to be a warfare officer. So he'd probably been there for about maybe 6 years by the time I got there. So he's joined in the late 1980s, like around 1988. And here we are in 2024. So he's made it through all the way through the upper echelons of the Royal Australian Navy and is responsible for the delivery of the project. So when you get to that point, what happens is sometimes these guys that are still in the military are looking at and examining all of these contracts, but the culture of the military is that, okay, now you've done your 25 years or your 30 years or whatever, it's time for you to get out. They get out and then they go and work for these other defense contracting companies and go back to their mates who are still in the military and they're still mucking around with these deals. And then the people that are, you know, so I've been working on this submarine deal for 5 years, and I get out, now I go and work for BAE or Raytheon or whoever. Now I'm going back to my mates that are in the military saying, hey, come and, you know, buy our stuff, trying to put the deal together. And then they get out and go, oh, I don't want to do this, man. I'm going to get out. Can you get me a job? Yeah, they get out and then they hook up into the defense contracting industry. And it's this big giant circle jerk at the top, at the upper echelons of the military that perpetuate these things. And part of the reason we should have had nuclear submarines in 2015. But here we are, we're not going to get them till 2040. And that's because of the culture of the military and the culture of what's actually happening. And it's all come out. It's all come out in the last couple of months. And it's another example, Ed, of failing upwards. But failing upwards at what cost? You know, at the cost of children not going to school during some fake thing that's going on out there that was completely unnecessary. There was absolutely no reason that kids couldn't go to school. No reason at all. None. It was just a knee-jerk reaction to exert some level of control across society while completely destroying those young people. You know, I look at education here in Australia and I got a massive axe to grind with that as well. During COVID, my son was at the end of year 11 in 2019, 2020, he was in year 12, the final year of high school. Travis is a super smart kid. He's really good at anything he applies his mind to, whether that's sport or academics or something like that. And then the pandemic happened, the lockdown happened, and he just played video games. And he lost all interest in school. Like, why would I give a shit about any of this? Like, I could sit here all day and do nothing, you know, I've just gone through the process. Even if I wanted to leave school, I can't get a job because I can't leave my house. I can't do it. And so the Australian government is completely responsible for completely destroying any education opportunities for those kids in year 11 and year 12 during that time frame. And nobody's been held accountable. Nobody. Well, the government was kicked out. The government of the day was kicked out. And the government of the day has been kicked out here in New South Wales as well. But those people that are there supported the policies of the government of the day. So they're no different. They're two sides of the same coin. And it just destroyed all of my son's opportunities for education. I don't know what he wants to do. I don't know what he could have been if he went to university. I don't know. But I'll never know now because you lock kids in their houses. Are you kidding me? Anyway, that's failing upwards.
Well, yeah. So it's the old revolving door too. You're talking about the military and the government, for that matter. How many politicians leave office and they become wealthier than they ever expected they would ever be? They go to work as consultants and lobbyists. There's people go into politics. A lot of people go into politics for the money. Yeah, they may not make that much money, although they get paid a pretty good penny. But the real money is when they leave office and they get that job as a consultant or a lobbyist. And in the military, geez, the real prize in the military, if you can just make general, man, you can just make general, you can write your own ticket to pretty much any contractor you want.
There's a bunch of politicians here in Australia in state government that have only ever been career politicians, a little bit like Joe Biden. But, I kind of look at Joe Biden and I think I'll let it slide because you've been there for 50 years. So you've been a career politician your entire life. I get it. But you can't go to university and study what it means to be in a union, which is what some politicians in Queensland have done. And then they get appointed to a position, a senior position in government. And these people have never had a real job in the real world. They don't know what it means to go to work and go home. They've only ever worked in the government. And a government job is one where, I'm not feeling so good today. Hey, boss, I'm going to have a sick day today. Okay, no worries, whatever. Because the same thing happens whether you're at work or you're not at work. And the amount of work that you actually do depends on you as an individual. There's that Rebecca Koffler saying that I heard her in her book say, and the way that her dad used to describe communism was that the workers pretend to go to work and the government pretends to pay. And the difference is that in our society, when you work in government, whether or not you go to work, you still get paid. And one of the biggest mistakes that happens in Australian politics is people get elected based on their education qualifications, not their life experience. And that really kind of grinds my gears because those people can't possibly represent individuals like you and me because they have no idea what it means to be you and me or even really know. I remember ScoMo was asked a question when he was the Prime Minister, how much is a bottle of milk or how much is a loaf of bread? Something really simple like that. And what the journalist was trying to do was just to show how out of touch he was. And he didn't know. I don't know. What do I know? I don't go down the local shop and buy a loaf of bread. Like, I'm the Prime Minister, for heaven's sake. Like, what do you mean? And it just really highlighted the absolute gall and arrogance of these people. And what it is part of it's a culture of failing upward. The culture is because it doesn't matter if you go to work or you go home, there's no performance requirements. I mean, sure, you have a performance review when you're in government, but the ramification is rarely that you're going to lose your job. And look at the mistakes. Look at Kamala Harris. Her performance review on the border. Like, there's so many examples of that we see on a daily basis,
And they just made her czar of,
I don't know, what, something else?
AI.
We're doomed.
Yeah.
Skynet's going to wipe us all out in the nuclear war, man, in the next couple of hours.
Yeah.
If Skynet finds that out, man, we're in big trouble.
So failing upward, right? She failed on the border and she screwed that up, but they gave her a promo.
Oh man, that is funny. I want to raise a point here, Ed, and I think it's really important because people will be watching this and listening to it and going, "Why are you guys even talking about this?" the reason that we talk about these things is because it's the fundamental foundation. They're the foundation pieces, and it's the fabric of our society. It's what holds our society together. In a meritocracy where you get rewarded and promoted for being successful, or in a capitalist society where you get rewarded and promoted and you make lots of money for providing products and services that people need, that's the society that's helped us to prosper. But when we end up in a place where somebody who can't even do one job, meaning control the border, and the irony is it was completely under control when she got there.
Of course.
And then she, don't worry about it. Well, why wouldn't you just say, just keep doing what you're doing? Just keep doing it. It's like, what do you really need me to do? I don't need to change any policy. The policy's not the same. We're going to keep the border closed. But that's the thing, that was not never the policy.
That's right. That depends on what your objectives really are.
Well, I always say that these things matter because it's the fabric of our society and it's the culture that we live within. And if that becomes acceptable in a public forum where people are failing upwards and you're consistently seeing Daniel Andrews locks down Victoria for 2 years, destroys all small businesses, destroys families, drives a wedge between families and friends, destroys relationships, people die under his watch, all sorts of crazy stuff had happened, and then they re-elect him. Like, what is the matter with you Victorians? I'm never going there again. What is wrong with you people? It's like, you know, in Australia, we call Victoria Mexico because anything south of the New South Wales border is Mexico. That's what Sydney side is. I'm going down to Mexico, right? That's how we facetiously say that. But, you know, I can't call it that anymore. I'm going to North Korea is where I'm going to when I go down there. That's what I'm afraid of. If I go down there, are they going to shut the borders? Is some copper going to bash me? Am I going to get pepper sprayed in the face? Am I going to get punched in the face? I never, ever want to go to Victoria or Melbourne ever again. Never, ever. And it came out just the other day that it's the second most livable city in the world. Fuck my ass. Really? I would never go there. Never.
Well, see, that's the way I feel about San Francisco or...
Shocking, right?
Or LA. What a disgrace. What? I mean, just think, if you're a San Franciscan, how embarrassing it must be when you have a foreign friend coming to visit you in your city. I'd be embarrassed.
I saw Ron DeSantis was there and he said something of similar ilk. And he said, well, what did you think was going to happen? There it is. There's socialism on display for you.
Yeah. Listen, what's the definition of insanity? You know, I mean, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I mean, how much pain can these Californians take? But at this point, pretty much everyone in California is a freeloader. You know, they're there for the free stuff, and that's what socialism. That's why
we don't have to pay for anything. You just go in the shops and take whatever you want.
That's right. $1,000 a pop. You know, $1,000. As long as you're coming under $1,000, I can see guys there with calculators. Hey, am I under $1,000? Adding up the goods. Am I under $1,000? You know, walking up the. Yeah. I mean, you pass these things. What do you think is going to happen? It's obvious. It's obvious pandering to their. I don't know. I guess they consider their base freeloaders. I guess that's what they think about their
strange policies. Well, what it does is it shows how out of touch the people that are in charge are with the constituents. They just don't know. So
hold on, back up here. Or maybe
that's what they want.
Maybe they're really in touch with what
No, man, no normal person wants homeless people shitting on the street like is going on there, and that's a real thing.
Listen, in democracy, in theory, you get what you pay for.
Well, in the spirit of failing...
They keep re-electing these people, Rob.
Well, in the spirit of failing upwards...
Yeah.
Well, it looks like the Democrat Party has washed their hands of Biden and they're not talking about the re-election. The only one that he's doing is talking about that, launches his campaign and everyone's like, yay.
Okay, so it's about...
Is Gavin Newsom going to be the candidate? Failing upwards into that position?
Oh, we'll see. Listen... The Democrats, this is a very tribal country, remember. It's a 49-49 split. And it doesn't matter anymore who the guy is. As long as he spouts the agenda, as long as he supports the agenda, they just plug him into the spot. You know, the frontline guy doesn't matter. Are you going to support our agenda? The machine is going to get you elected. The machine.
Well, he seems the natural choice, doesn't he?
Well, it's right up those left. The Democratic Party has just gone just so far. I mean, say they're far left. There's nothing on the scale left for these guys. It's like bizarro world. You know, the things they come up with. I mean, they're passing. Listen, if you're a parent and you want the right to force your 8-year-old girl to have transgender surgery because she showed signs of whatever for a day. So you want to put her on puberty blockers. You want a government who will let you do it, and you want a government who will let you pay for it. Who will pay
Very
for it
strange,
for you,
isn't it?
right?
It's very strange.
So the people, if you're in the LGBTQ whatever number letter you want to put in there thing is, and they say anything goes for you, got whatever you want, you got. If you have a government say whatever you want, you got, to those people, those people are going to vote for you. So the question is, well, maybe they do know their constituency really well.
And maybe that is the majority. Maybe you and me are just old-fashioned. And we're old fogies sitting on the porch in our rocking chairs with our shotgun in our laps.
Well,
maybe that's it. Maybe times have changed, but I don't think so, man. Because when I have conversations with friends and family and people that I know, and I'm chatting online to people all day long, I don't find this liberalist leftist ideology. What I find is just center people. Where I don't mind if people do that, but I really prefer that people did this. I feel people are very reasonable.
Well, that's because you run around with white supremacists all day long.
That's what it is, man. I'm going to be in big trouble. Big trouble. I'll close out this little segment here by I've been nearly finished that book called The Puppeteers, and right towards the end of the book, he talks about why the Democrats need society to be completely divided, and part of what that actually is. And there's a bunch of government departments that go and fund these non-for-profits that go around to these businesses and go, hey, you can't say that, that's discrimination. And they're collecting all of the fines. So the government funds these non-for-profits. Then these non-for-profits bring lawsuits against companies that are not inclusive enough and that are not doing the right thing. And what happens is they get fined, the government seizes the money, and then the government uses the money to fund its projects that it wants to fund. So all of this transgender stuff and all of this crazy fake racism stuff that's out there is driven by the Democratic agenda to get more money to fund the projects that they want to fund because Congress won't release the money. And when he's talking in the book about how much money is being released in relation to these things, he's talking about like $500 million in fines. It's not a small amount of money, man. It's a massive amount of money in fines.
I mean, you got to wonder how many taxpayers would that fund? I mean, $500 million or $5 billion. How many taxpayers would it take to accumulate $5 billion?
Well,
and you get people out there who are struggling trying to pay their taxes on time. They're trying to scrape together that $1,000 so they don't get in trouble with the IRS.
Yeah, it's a real thing. I recommend that book to everyone. I'll dig the link out, and when I produce this episode, I'll make sure that link goes into the show notes. But that's the actual book there. It's called The Puppeteers. That's the cover of it there. So it's really, really good. Jason Chavez is written by. It's about the deep state. So really worthwhile looking. All right, folks, let's take a little break, and we'll be right back. Ed and I want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by you. In this crazy, uncertain world, we all need a way to protect and insulate ourselves from the outside forces that we simply cannot control. I'm a news junkie, and after a lifetime of constantly immersing myself in the darkness and the despair that engulfs the world, the path to shield myself and my family has become crystal clear. I want to invite you to come and join me in the Unspoken Truth community, where I'll show you how I protect my family from this crazy world. You'll get access to 3 masterclasses worth over $1,000, as well as our live events, training, and community of truthers just like you. Come on over to the unspokentruth.com.au and join us for just 50 cents a day. What are you waiting for? Get started now at the unspokentruth.com.au. All right, folks, I want to shift gears into a rather serious topic. Yesterday, I believe, was a severe and significant turning point in the war between Russia and Ukraine. And I'm really, really worried, folks, that we're going to all be drawn into this for no good reason. And this war is not about freedom. It's not about democracy. It's about the degradation of the Russian state and then the powers that be that want to go in and implement their stupid policies and their stupid systems. Okay, so this is not about democracy and it's not about freedom. That is all a lie. To begin with, I was an instrument of the deep state, believing that the evil Russians should never invaded Ukraine and they were innocent in everything they were doing. But the longer this goes on, the more I can see it for what it actually is. So I just want to remind everybody, not yesterday, the day before. So on Thursday here in Sydney, Sergei Shoigu, the boss of the Russian military, came out and said that if the Ukrainians use Storm Shadow, attack arms, or ground-launched small-diameter bombs, so any long-range weapon systems supplied by the West, to attack Crimea, that he would consider that the US and the UK are directly involved in the war, meaning they're not just supporting them, they are directly involved and they're directing it. And the reality is he's 100% right, because there's no way that we could strike Crimea with long-range weapon systems because the Ukrainians didn't have them. They've only got them because we gave it to them. So we are directly involved in this war. But I think it's just a matter of time before the Russians actually get this to spill over and it extends into something else. And I believe that this red line is the final red line. And the Russians keep drawing red lines. Don't cross it. Don't cross it. I'm telling you, don't cross it. But this, I believe, is the last one, because they've said repeatedly on many occasions that if you go and try and attack Crimea and try and take that ground back, that's considered an existential threat to the existence of our nation, and we will use nuclear weapons on you. So there's a couple of things that happened. The day after he said that, the Ukrainians struck a bridge that connects Crimea to Ukraine, and this is what the bridge did look like. So bear with us here, folks. I think we might be having a technical problem, so hopefully you can see the image on the screen. So there's two bridges. One that is closest to the bottom of the screen is the one that was struck, and the other one there was not. It was hit by a storm shadow, put a big hole in the bridge, looks like that. But literally 24 hours later, the Russians have built a pontoon bridge right next to it. So it kind of makes the whole thing a moot point, and it really doesn't matter because the water that it's crossing there, the river, is not very wide. Looks like it's only 100 or 200 meters wide there. So they've built a pontoon bridge, but we can hit that again, and that's not really going to be a problem. But I doubt that they'll use another cruise missile to take down a pontoon bridge, which is going to be fixed in the next 3 hours. So, them hitting that bridge, is that making a difference to the way this is actually going to play out? Yeah, maybe, because it definitely slows down the supply chain and the logistics. And the reason that this matters so much in the southern part of Ukraine as it comes out of Crimea is that's because how the Russian forces in the south are being resupplied. Something in the vicinity of 70% of the resupplies are coming across that part of the world in the southern part of Crimea. And as they've taken down all of these bridges, what it does is it makes it, the Russians have to go the long way round to actually get there, and extending their supply chains causes all sorts of problems, right? So this is the Ukrainians shaping the battlefield. So when I look at all of this, I kind of just I look at it and wonder, are the Russians now going to make good on their threat? And their direct threat was, we now consider the US and the UK to be part of this conflict. So now they're considering that. So the video that I created on Thursday was all about, if the Russians do say that, then Australia is now at war with Russia. And are we already at war with Russia anyway because we're supplying the Ukrainians all this stuff? Well, it's a proxy war, so yes. But if the Russians declare war, then that means by association, Australia will be drawn in, so will Canada, so will New Zealand, so will all the Five Eyes will be pulled into that. And then any other countries that are supporting will also be pulled in. The Japanese will be pulled in, the South Koreans will be pulled in. Everyone will be pulled in, and all of NATO as well. So this is a major, major escalation. And we haven't seen this happen. We've only heard the threats and the rhetoric from the Russians. I want to play a quick video about what Zelensky says. So just bear with it, because he's talking Ukrainian, and then there's a translator over the top of it. So I'll just turn the sound down a bit because it's quite loud. But have a listen to what he says, because there's some element of truth to what Zelensky is saying here.
Will have to send their sons and daughters exactly the same way as we are sending their sons and daughters to war. And they will have to fight, because it's NATO that we're talking about, and they will be dying, God forbid, because it's a horrible thing.
So he's saying, give me all the weapons and we'll fight for you on your behalf so you don't have to fight there. So we know from NATO and Article 5, and everybody's an expert on the war now, that if Russia strikes anybody in NATO, that will trigger Article 5, because a strike on one is a strike on everybody. And the only time that was really triggered was during 9/11. So America were attacked. That means NATO comes to its rescue. That's why Denmark was in Afghanistan. Like, what? Why was Australia in Afghanistan? because of the ANZUS treaty that we have, where we follow America blindly into every conflict and get involved in everything that's going on there like that. Look, put all that aside for a second. This is how it happens. So what does it mean if Shoigu says this is a red line? So his red line is, now that US and the UK are directly involved in the conflict, now what Russia is going to do is go after command and control that we haven't gone after before. So you would think that the Russians had been trying to target Zelensky and his government. And I watched an interview yesterday for about 40 minutes, so you don't have to watch it because it's pretty painful. It's like pulling your fingernails out yourself, with the Russian ambassador in the UK. And the reporter is really quite belligerent towards this guy. He doesn't really give him a chance. And the Russian ambassador's like, listen, man, you know, this is an interview. You're interviewing me. This is not a conversation. Ask me the questions, I'll give you the answers. And he just doesn't give him a chance to speak properly. And one of the questions that he asks is, you know, are you going to, what do you want? Like, what's the end state? And pretty much what the Russian guy says is, we just want to get rid of the government. Yeah, and we want Ukraine to be neutral, not to be in NATO, and we want to use that as a buffer zone. So it's everything that you and I have been saying, Ed, the whole time. And you might not like this guy, you might not like his attitude, you might not like the way that he's speaking or what he's saying, but the reality is, it doesn't matter if you like him or not. The only way to end a war is to sit down and talk with people you don't like. The whole reason you're at war is because you don't like them, you don't like what they're saying. But you have to listen to what they say. But essentially, the Ukrainians on their side are saying Russia has to leave all territory and go back to 2014 borders, which means includes Crimea. And the Russians are saying the Ukrainian government's got to go because they're a bunch of Nazis. And they're a bunch of liars that are actually causing all sorts of problems. And they've started the war in 2014 when they were bombing the Donbass, killing thousands of people, which is also true. So it's a very, very complicated situation. But Shoigu has said that if you strike Crimea, we're going to go after your command and control, and we're going to go after your centers of gravity, to use his word, which means we're going to go after your leadership. So now they're going after the leadership. All right, good luck with that, because we've got all the missile defense systems in place in Kyiv, and Patriot will shoot them down, NASAM will shoot them down. All of this, your Kinzhal missiles haven't really worked at scale the way that you thought, because they've been engaged by Patriot, because hypersonic missiles are not as good as stealth missiles. Apparently that's how this is playing out. But Putin came out just a couple of days ago in St. Petersburg, and I'm joining all the dots here for you folks, and I'll show you why this matters in a sec. He came out and said, we've got weapon systems that can attack any target, anywhere, at any time, irrespective of your defenses. And I think what he's talking about is a hypersonic ballistic missile that's going to rain down from space. So if they do fire a ballistic missile that literally comes down from space, and I'm not like talking an Iskander missile that skims the top of the atmosphere. I'm talking about one that comes out of the atmosphere and comes down at 25 times the speed of sound and lands on the Parliament building of Kyiv with a conventional warhead. It will take out that place, and it can't be shot down because it simply cannot be intercepted with the systems that we've actually got. So when you join the dots between what Shoigu was saying, what Putin is saying, and what they're threatening to do, now we cross their red line. Does that mean that this is going to escalate? Well, if it escalates to a nuclear level, this is what the Americans have now come out and said. And this is really important, folks. I want you to listen closely to this, because a strike on NATO means NATO is going to be drawn into the conflict. But the Russians are not striking NATO. They're not. They're threatening to go after centers of gravity using conventional weapons. But the American government is trying to shape the battlefield of your mind to get you ready for a nuclear attack of some description. Now, that could be we blow up the cooling pool in Zaporizhia, all the water leaks out of it, and there's a massive nuclear fallout that happens there as a result of it. So we talk about false flags all the time. You know, would the Ukrainians do that to themselves? Would they blow up their own dam? Would they blow up the Nord Stream pipeline? Would they blow the barrier of that cooling pool to let all the water out, to let a massive nuclear apocalypse run riot throughout Europe? Well, what defines the threshold of NATO getting involved there? Let's take a listen to what the number one warmonger / warhawk Lindsey Graham has got to say.
Today, since the Senate resolution that says that if Russia or Belarus or a proxy of Russia explodes a nuclear device inside of Ukraine to stop the counteroffensive or
So very clearly he says explodes a nuclear device. So he doesn't say anything about Zaporizhia or a nuclear accident or something happening in the crossfire. So he's talking about an actual nuke.
Try to break the will of the Ukrainian people. Such an attack should be considered an attack on NATO itself.
All right, folks, that's the escalation right there. He's saying that if nuclear weapons are used in Ukraine, so you're not attacking NATO or America or any of the allies directly, then NATO will get involved, and he's passed that legislation.
We're of the belief that a nuclear weapon unleashed in Ukraine would irradiate large portions of Europe where we have NATO allies.
So right there, I think that's the actual ambiguity. That's the strategic ambiguity of what he's saying. And I've watched this a couple of times and listened very carefully to what he's saying. So he's saying if you use a nuclear weapon on Ukraine, and then he's talking about the fallout cloud. So he's saying the result. So now just fast forward 2 weeks into the future when they blow the side of the dam, whether that's the Russians, the Ukrainians, or somebody else blows up the side of, not the dam, the cooling pond, all the water leaks out, the fuel rods are exposed, and suddenly radiation is leaking out all over Europe. Is that the same as a nuclear detonation? Yeah, it's exactly, in some ways, it's probably worse, because any nuclear detonation that's going to happen is going to be an airburst. Yeah, it's not a Terminator movie where these bombs hit the ground and pull up massive fallout. They'll set the bomb off at 15,000 feet in the atmosphere, and the overpressure from the bomb destroys everything on the ground. That we don't need a ground strike, and there is no radiation fallout from something like that. There's the gamma radiation that hits the people on the ground when the bomb goes off, but in terms of fallout and dust, nuclear winters and all of those things, almost nothing happens when that goes on. So if they put an airburst at 15 or 20,000 feet in the atmosphere, it will destroy a massive part of Ukraine and a massive part of the battlefield, but it won't actually create massive nuclear fallout. So the Russians can use nuclear weapons pretty effectively as a battlefield tool. That's when they call them tactical, even though there's no such thing as a tactical or strategic, they're just nuclear weapons. But they can use it tactically to destroy parts of the battlefield without creating huge amounts of fallout, because they don't want to be on the receiving end of that either. So that's how they do it. But if they take out this cooling pool, and it's very, very likely that this is going to happen, the result will be the same as a ground burst. And if anything, it will be much worse.
And why are we doing this? President Biden says threat of Putin using tactical nuclear weapons is real. That's like the 20th story down. So with a sense of urgency, we're urging our colleagues here to get serious about what could happen in Ukraine. Moving the tactical nuclear weapons out of Russia to Belarus was unnerving and I think very provocative. The counteroffensive is moving slowly but steadily.
It's hard to watch, hey? It's hard to watch because you feel that feeling of despair where you're like, don't, man, you're escalate. Stop it, man. Why don't you just get on the phone? Just get on the phone and talk to Putin. And if he doesn't pick up your call him again tomorrow, and then the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and figure out what you can do to stop this. But instead of figuring out what to do to stop this, what they're trying to do is use strategic deterrence, and they're trying to use deterrence to say that don't even think about it. Don't think about it for a second. But the reality is they are already thinking about it because they moved the nukes into Belarus. So what's the next thing we're going to do? We're going to move nukes out of Turkey and out of Italy and move those nukes into Ukraine to say, here's the ultimate deterrent right here. We've got now Ukraine have got nukes as well. It's like, come on, man. Well, let's finish up what he's got to say here.
Looking for a break, they will commit the forces that have been trained by the West, 6 or 8 regiments, thousands of well-trained, well-equipped forces will be put into the battle when they can exploit an opportunity. So the Ukrainians are patient. Russia has fortified their defensive positions. They've mined the whole country. They've been committing war crimes on steroids, very abusive.
Listen to his rhetoric. They've mined the whole country. You don't know that, man. They've committed war crimes on steroids. Again, yes, we've seen some, but yeah, both sides. But you don't know that. I created a little graphic here, and it says, where is it? It says, is this all just shaping the public battlefield? And I would say yes. Shaping the battlefield means getting ready for an assault. So are they getting you ready for an assault? Well, they're doing more than that because they're passing laws that allow NATO to engage directly with the Russians in the event that this actually unfolds.
War being waged by Putin. But we're here to talk about something nobody else seems to want to talk about. I applaud President Biden for putting on the table that the threat of Putin using a nuclear weapon in Ukraine is real.
Well,
And our message is
so
to
the
those
fuck
around.
I know. All right, that's enough of the world's worst warmonger, I think.
I hope you couldn't hear me swearing under my breath.
Yeah, I
as he was
could.
talking. Oh, could you? Oh, darn it.
I didn't mute you. I left it in there because I like seeing the American reaction. It's crazy,
Wow.
isn't it? It's crazy.
I have no use for Lindsey Graham. He is why I'm not a Republican. Listen, I'm definitely not a Democrat, but I mean, I'm closer to the Republicans in theory, but there are a lot of Republicans I have no use for. And
Why don't you like him?
He's because of stuff like this. This guy, you can't depend. He's not a consistent conservative. He picks and chooses when he wants to be a conservative. And in this case, listen, we had a peace deal a year ago. Okay,
we did.
It
Probably
was
people like him that scuttled it.
That's right. That's right. And why? Because okay, I'm not a fan of Putin, so don't misunderstand me. Everyone, don't start sending me hate mail. But listen, in many ways, Putin is being far more reasonable than the other side. If Putin's objective in Ukraine is to have a government in Ukraine that is not adversarial to Russia, kind of like the government that we had before Zelensky. If they're just a friendly government, so we can rely on them not, joining NATO and not doing things.
And who overthrew that government?
Yep, CIA.
CIA.
Listen,
just saying, man.
So Putin's definition of success that's his definition, whereas Zelensky's definition of success is we want Donbass back, we want Crimea back, and we want Putin gone. Okay, Come on. Between the two, who do you think would be more reasonable between in their definition of success? What is victory? And Putin's idea of victory is much more attainable, I think, and it can be achieved without ongoing war. It can be done if people of good heart and good intent sit down. They could negotiate this away. The problem is we have outside forces putting their thumbs in the scale, meaning America. This is not a Ukrainian-Russian war. This is an American-Russian war, and Ukraine is just a proxy. Okay, that's what's going on here. This has never been about democracy. This is primarily a money laundering operation. There's a lot of people getting rich off of this war. So from the West point of view, that's what this war is about. Putin, I think, actually has state interests involved, whereas the West, we have money interests involved. So anyway, so
the reason I wanted to raise this today, Ed, as well, and that's another example of failing upwards, by the way. The reason I wanted to raise it is because there's certain inflection points that happen during conflicts where the tide actually begins to turn, and that turns one way or the other. We find this vacillation between the front lines of, the Ukrainians take back a couple of 100 meters, now they take back a kilometer, then the Russians take some ground somewhere else in the country, and then we're going back and forth, and this vacillation, and nothing is really happening. It's a stalemate, and it is a war of attrition. And if NATO gets involved in that, just don't think for a second that it won't be a war of attrition when NATO get involved in there either, because the Russians' ability to outsuffer everybody else is far greater than our ability to do that. But we're relying on technology and the Air Force to actually solve all of the problems. But at the end of the day, it still requires troops to seize and hold the ground. And if the Russians have the ability to outsuffer us, it doesn't matter how much they've been destroyed from the sky. If they're able to have more people there, then they're going to outlast us. And the chances of that happening are becoming more and more by the day. And I believe that when Shoigu threatened that on Thursday, and on Friday the bridge is actually struck and we've overstepped his red line again, I reckon they're going to make good on this threat. And that's why I wanted to raise this, because it's an inflection point of so is now Australia, strictly speaking, at war with Russia? Because according to the Russian definition, yes, It is. We are. So the next natural step is, okay, let's get troops in there. Let's end this. Let's send the Air Force. Let's send the Navy. Let's send our troops. Like, really? Is that where we're going? You know, with our pissy little 7 battalions of soldiers that are going to get chomped up and spat out in a couple of months? Now what? Now we've got conscription here in Australia because there's no way to reconstitute the forces. Like, are you kidding me? Like, and in your country there, Ed, 80% of people can't join the military because they simply can't make the fitness standard. The same would be true here in Australia. But if conscription came along, you know, what are you going to get? These types of shots.
Yeah.
Man.
Okay, this is my take on it. I think that this war, this nuclear war scaremongering, I think that's what it is. I think it's scaremongering. This has been coming up like every other week now for over a year.
Shaping the battlefield.
Shaping the battlefield, right? And I don't see it happening. And because Russia knows that they are going to be an instant global pariah if they were to do that. Now, I do believe Putin when he says, if I feel an existential threat like Crimea or Mother Russia then I will use it. That I can see. Anything short of that, I don't see them.
So what happens then in 3 months' time? So the vacillation on the front lines continues for another 3 months, and then all of a sudden we have Ukrainian F-16 pilots launching from Romania, and all of a sudden they're striking Crimea directly with JDAMs, with missiles, JASAM, all of that stuff, and they're striking directly into Crimea. Now, is that suddenly an existential threat? And then what happens if those same aircraft are now conducting airstrikes over Donbass as well, and in the southern part of the territory that the Russians currently hold? Does that represent an existential threat? Because really, it's not that much further to go across the border to Belgrade or down to Rostov. There's not very far to go with those jets. And that's where I say that there's never going to be a good situation here. The counteroffensive is either going to work, the Ukrainians will get a security guarantee, they'll join NATO, or they'll be destroyed. And I think we're on the precipice of all three of those things. It's very unnerving.
Well, let me just check real quick. Let me send this text. Vladimir, what would you consider an existential? I don't know what he would consider an existential threat. Would he include Donbass in that situation?
Well, they consider that. The Russian ambassador said that yesterday. I posted that video on the Telegram channel. He said, yes, we had a referendum in Russia, and that is now Russian territory. If you're attacking those parts, that's Russia.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Okay. So, whatever. I still don't think. I don't think Donbass personally. I don't think that would warrant a nuclear attack. Crimea, I think.
No, what I'm saying is, if you got fighter jets that are going there, destroying command and control, supply and logistics in the rear in those places, it's the pilot probably has to go like that with the controls, and he's in Russian airspace.
Okay, we're splitting hairs here. We're in semantic territory, advanced semantics. Where. We've already been supplying them. All the weapons they're using right now have been supplied to them. They all come. They're not dealing with any Ukrainian equipment anymore.
That's exactly what the Russian ambassador said yesterday. Right. He said that exact thing. What was the goal? The reporter said, and he said to demilitarize them and to denazify them, whatever that means. So he said we've succeeded in demilitarizing them because of what you just said. The only weapons that they're using are Western weapons now.
Yeah. Okay. So, how good am I? So me and the Russian ambassador, we're like this, man. We're
you're like a Russian sleeper agent, aren't you? Like a K agent from the K program in the 1970s. You weren't born in Minnesota. Come clean.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. That's my.
There it is. There it is.
Okay. Well. As far as this is what I think would happen in lieu of a nuclear bomb going off in the atmosphere, I think we would see like a cyber attack. I think we would see. We'd see an introduction of a gold-backed global currency.
Faster.
I think we would see that. Yeah, I think we would see other types of war that they could do to us. They've done. In terms of a cyber attack war, okay, who would win? Well, I would contend that Russia would win a cyber attack war, and this is why. And I want your thoughts on this, Rob. Okay, so America, we are soft. We can't go through a day without, I can, but most Americans, they can't get through a day with this. We're so tied to our electronics and to our TVs, and we like to have our heat, and we like to have our water, little things like that. Russians are famous for suffering. They're famous for doing without. They're famous for an analog type of life. The West, we rely on a digital world. So in terms of who would survive at least longer in that kind of environment, I think Russia would. I don't know, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think you're on the money. If the cyber attack happens and the internet gets switched off or the power gets switched off, I think that would be more detrimental in a Western society than it ever would be in Russian society. I think the Russians are kind of take it in their stride and go, yeah, it'll be difficult for them as well. But do they have the capability to do that? I think the short answer is yes. And the short answer is, it comes down to that theory where Joe Biden keeps saying that the greatest threat to American security is white supremacists. And everyone goes, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about, dude? Yeah. We know you're old and you're a bit senile, but what? White supremacists? So look out, folks, when they say white supremacists have ponied up with Russian hackers, that's when it all gets rolled out, and that's when this whole thing gets enacted. Well, the Russians are not attacking anybody, man.
Well, that's the thing about cyber attacks, right? Cyber attacks are fairly easy to hide. You can. It's hard to determine who actually did it, right?
That's why the theory is that they say the white supremacists have ponied up with the Russians to give them access to make that happen. So now the power's off, the internet is off. You better do as you're bloody told, and you can forget about the war in Russia because you're not going to see that on TV because all of that's gone away. And that the American government is going to get you to capitulate to do whatever you need to do, and that's when the resistance actually begins, right?
Well, that is actually brilliant. They can kill two birds with one stone.
That's the idea, and the economy too.
Yeah, there you go, and bring in the CBDCs. I don't know what those they would run on without electricity, but
they'll turn the electricity on to let you to power your phone, so you can get your phone, and you've got the app on your phone. You can get through the checkpoint. You can scan in because they need to know where you are. It's a complete destruction and demolition of society as you know it. And I've always said that these sycophants that actually run the government, doesn't matter what government you're in, they're just idiots. But these idiots that run government will take us right up to the very edge of a nuclear apocalypse and let you peer over the edge to see what's there. And that missile strike yesterday on that bridge is them taking us up to the very edge of a nuclear apocalypse. And I know the Russians keep threatening that. I know that. And I get it. They're the boy that cried wolf as well. They're continuously threatening to do the same things. But the reality is, why do we keep poking it? Why do we keep on doing that? The reality of all of this is if the NATO Air Force got involved and they got involved, we would take back Crimea in a matter of like weeks. It would be over. And I think that's what is going to happen. I think that Zaporizhia, that little cooling pond, that's going to create a nuclear disaster on a scale that we've never seen. And then off we go.
Right. And I don't buy, listen, it could happen, but I don't buy that Russia would do it. I think it could happen because
100%. I don't believe Russia would do that at all. Not for a second, man. Yeah. Not for a second. But we need a reason and an excuse to get in there.
There you go. We need a fundraising operation. We need,
that's it.
That's it.
He needs a new jumper.
Ukraine has brought in more money over the past couple of years than they would have made from their own GDP. Okay,
dude, I've been looking at like the numbers as like the EU gives 3 billion, UK promises this billion, America this billion, blah blah blah, and I'm like, luckily I can't see Australia in any of that. Surely we're not giving these people any more money. Surely, why are we? Stop it! Cut it out! I didn't vote for that. Cut it out. Neither did you, by the way.
No. I mean, war right now is Ukraine's most profitable industry.
Yeah, absolutely it is. No question.
And if Ukraine is making a ton of money, just think of all the acolytes, all the people who have their hands in the till in this war. A lot of people are getting really rich on this money laundering operation. That's what this is. This is a big money laundering operation, for the West.
It's not about freedom. It's not about security. Not about anything like that. Folks, thank you so much for joining us for another week of The Unspoken Truth. I've got some videos that I'll be putting out over the weekend, but we'll be back on Monday American time and Tuesday Minnesota time. We've got a funny photo there to close it out. Click it on the screen again. I like that.
This is how.
What did back in your day, Ed? This is how they
That's
looked
right.
after kids.
This is right. When I was growing up, you didn't want to lock your kid in the car when it was hot. So the way the parents dealt with it, this is how they dealt with it. So problem solved. So you didn't have to worry about leaving your kid in a hot car. And then you go and do your grocery shopping, and then you come out and
And you're good to go.
Good to go. I mean, different times, right?
I got a funny graphic here. If you could see this, there's something wrong on my end. There's the American dude with his hat. What's he know? Uncle Sam wants you. Uncle Sam's cutting a hole in the ice, and the Russian bear's standing behind him, and he continues to cut the hole, and the Russian bear just moves out of the way. That kind of describes exactly what's going on in the battlefield in Ukraine and this geopolitics bullshit that we're all dealing with. All right, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to follow us as a podcast. Head over to your favorite podcasting app. Get a copy of the show over there, and make sure you come on over to Twitter and to Telegram as well. All of the links are in the description below. Thanks again for joining us. Thanks for your support. Thanks for your comments, and thanks for joining us on the lives. We'll see you in a couple of days. It's bye for now. See you, Ed.
God save the Queen.
God save the Queen.